Welcome to successfully validating and deploying smart on FHIR apps on EHR platforms in the real world. I'm your host, Melinda Stewart from HL7. Our moderator today is Rick Geimer on HIPAA, and I'd like to introduce our speakers for today, Travis Cummings and Nikolai Schwertner from Interoperian. Travis, it's all to you.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'll just provide a brief introduction and then proceed with the agenda today. This is what we have outlined. We're going to talk about EHR validations through the vendor programs. So we're going to cover the developer programs themselves individually. We're going to cover Epic, Cerner, and AllScripts. We're going to talk about strategies for app validation, thoughts concerning production deployments, and practical concerns, and then solutions that we have. Just briefly, our company is Interoperian. We're a healthcare software company, a healthcare integrator. We have an integration platform called Interopio, and we have a healthcare app hosting solution called Interopio Health Cloud. And then we have a business services line where we consult and build healthcare applications for other people and host and distribute those as well. So let's jump right in. So I'm going to provide 3 slides summarizing the developer programs. I just want to point out that these developer programs by these vendors are very distinct programs. They're not, there's not a lot of commonality between them. Their business models are different. And so it really does an injustice if you try to do an apples to apples comparison of these programs. So noting that this is an apples to oranges comparison, we'll take a look at these. As you may, in building your app, you may target one or more of these vendors and their programs. So if we start with Epic, Epic's program is called App Orchard. Links provided. The program details link is an extensive PDF file that contains most of the information that you'll see today concerning Epic. Epic has an integration tool called the Hyperspace Simulator that's very useful in testing and validating your app before formal EHR validation. We see that the time frame that from the point in which we submit an app to Epic for validation and then the app completes the validation process is around 6 to 8 weeks, generally on average. And then we see some pricing details concerning Epic's program. They have 3 tiers, each with distinct benefits. These are all can be found in the program details, section 8, if you'd like more information regarding Epic. The Cerner program, Cerner is the Cerner code program with the link in the FAQs as shown. Cerner provides a launch portal at this address where you can test and launch your application. And then the validation time that we see Cerner in the documentation is reporting 10 to 14 weeks. In our experience, it's been a little longer than that. But I'm sure there's people report different experiences, but we've just seen it take a little longer than that. Cerner's program fees is not publicly available to my knowledge. Instead, they want you to work on your app and then start a conversation with them on what your app is, what you're trying to accomplish, and then figure out a model that works very well for you. So, but at a high level, they do have 2 models, a standard model and an advanced model, advanced being a deeper integration between yourself and Cerner. And they both operate on a per site connection fee with the transaction fees associated with your application usage. And it's noted that this fee for Cerner does include your EHR validation. The AllScripts program can be found here. AllScripts provides sandbox systems that you can see at this point to launch against various AllScripts products and versions, as well as guidelines for testing your application within AllScripts. AllScripts validation takes between 10 to 15 weeks and is in a series of 4 distinct phases that you go through. This is the most recent pricing information I could find for AllScripts. It may be, I wasn't able to confirm that this is current as of this time, but this is the most recent that I was aware of. They have, when you join the AllScripts program, you join it as one of these four, in one of these four relationships. Open, integrator, partner, or strategic partner, with the pricing details included. So the amazing thing about the AllScripts program is that their FHIR APIs are available for free for all of the programs. And it's their proprietary APIs that they then charge money according to the program model. With that, let's jump into the meat of the presentation for today. We're talking about application validation. And I mentioned we have a line of business services where we help people get their applications through validation, both those applications that we build and sometimes we distribute those and host those as well. And this is the model that we lay out in our in that program. And you can see it's pretty typical. We have an envision and build phase, and I would imagine that anybody building an application would go through a similar cycle. An envision and build set phase where we're figuring out what it is that we're trying to accomplish, and then we do all the fun engineering activities to actually build the app. When the app is built, then we move into the validate with the EHRs phase. This is generally required before your application goes into a healthcare site, and that's generally following an app store model where you, similar with the Apple App Store or any app store, you submit to the app store and then your customers get your application from there. The EHRs do have legacy programs, and some of them are supported currently, and some of them are deprecated, in which you can work with a healthcare site directly and bypass the app store. We're not going to talk about that model today. In my observation, that's being phased out in favor of the app store by all major vendors. So we're going to focus on this validate with the EHR phase, which is a prerequisite to distributing your app to different healthcare sites and then maintaining your app over time. For the purpose of this discussion, we're mainly considering applications that are built and are provider facing and often are for a user context. So this model isn't attempting to describe patient-facing apps or other apps. One thing to note here, this validate with the EHR, this activity, it's required that your application is in a production hosting in order to do this activity. So they don't want to be reviewing your app and validating it in a test environment or in a demo environment, an actual production environment that has HIPAA controls in place so those can be evaluated. So let's jump in. Today, I'm going to present 3 strategies around having a smooth and efficient validation process. And with each of those strategies, I'll provide some tips. So the first thing that we want to talk about is the dreaded security questionnaire. And this is something that is part of EHR validations. You're going to be asked what your security model is. But this is asked many times other than beyond EHR validation. Other times that we're asked this is if a vendor or a healthcare provider is looking for somebody to partner with them to build an application. They will often do a security assessment of the different vendors. Number 2 is when we mentioned EHR app submission. And number 3, as your app completes EHR validation, and then you try to distribute it to healthcare sites, each of those sites will also do a security questionnaire and a security review of the application and yourself as a company if you're hosting the app. So the first strategy is take time to get organized around these security questionnaires. I'll show you a few tips regarding this. The first thing is to set the right context. All of this security stuff, the context is the covered entity at the end who is running your app. So even though we're talking about a vendor who is ourselves building the app, an EHR vendor who your app is going to be running within, but it's all in the context of the covered entity. And of course, we're all familiar with HIPAA privacy and HIPAA security rules. But we want to set the expectation that when you're defining your app, think of it from the eyes of the covered entity and what exposure or what obligations they're required to meet, with your app being one of their tools. So with that in mind, let's move to tip number 1. And this is to your app. We recommend that your app does have a security specification. In our case, we use these security specifications for 2 reasons. One is to do QA on the app itself and on its deployment. And the other is to provide to covered entities so that they can quickly see how the app is addressed and covered by HIPAA. And so for this activity, what we do is we take the summary level for HIPAA privacy rule and HIPAA security rule, and we do a point-by-point mapping from those into a security specification specific for the app. So this is obviously a template here, but you can see as you look down, it's going to do an analysis of the privacy rule and begin going through point by point, stating how this application, when running at a healthcare site, is going to either address this condition directly or facilitate the covered entity in addressing it themselves. So at the end of the day, this is what they have to, this is their obligation, and we have to support them in that. So now we have a security specification for the app that maps to HIPAA. The next tip is to take that security specification and try to generalize as many statements as you can and generalize them into your policies. So the security specification becomes a set of references to your policies. And this is under the context of organizing. So if we see how this works, if we took one of these, for example, a permitted use and disclosure analysis, we can see that the app is going to just simply say, it doesn't provide any function related to this item. And then it refers to the privacy policies. If we see here, we also see some references to business associate agreements. Other places we'll see references to terms of acceptable use, terms of use, terms of service, and such. But in the end, the security specification should provide less inline and more referencing to your policies. And that will help you, of course, be able to repeatedly produce security specs for applications, but also help you develop a rich set of policies that is very topical related to your apps and processes. The third tip is that when it comes time to fill out that questionnaire, whether it's for a covered entity, in this case, Acme Hospital, or it's for an EHR vendor validation, in this case, Epic App Orchard, the answers that you're providing are coming from your policies for the most part. And of course, there are some implementation specific questions, but for the most part, they should be drawn from your policies. And in that sense, you've now organized yourself so that the activity of doing a questionnaire is now straightforward, and you're less, otherwise the behavior seems to be with each new questionnaire, you provide a new set of answers. We can't remember what answers you provided on the last questionnaire, which is certainly not a good place to be. Let's move forward onto the next strategy, and this is related to your project plan. So we've mentioned before a timeline associated with validating your app. That's generally the timeline from after you hit submit. It's not the timeline before you hit submit. So in our case, we split this into 2 phases. There's preparing for submission, and then there's the submitting the app and going through the validation process. So it's this section number 1 that we'll talk about next. And the tendency is I've got to build my app before I start this. And when I'm all done with my app, then I'll start validation. And that's true, except you want to start at step 2, having already done step 1. So don't wait to prepare to submit your app. I'll show you what that means. So these are just some numbers that we use in our project planning. They include the days that we've identified earlier. On this side, you'll see days that we include in what it takes us to prepare for validation. We'll show a project plan and then explain in further detail what is actually being accomplished in this time period here. But here we see an example of a project. We have a little design phase at the start. We're going to build out that security specification. Then we're iteratively going to build the application. At some point here, we're going to deploy it to our production HIPAA environment. And now we're going to say we're ready for validation. If we haven't done this step, then it slides in here, and this slides out 30 days in our case. Now, what is this? This is kicking off a separate project related to validating your app, where you need to gather the materials that are going to be submitted here at the start of this activity. So these are things like your official title, your description, your icons, logos, and screenshots, your privacy policies, your sales agreements, all of these things that involve marketing or the business side or legal. We kick those off. On day 2. So if a project on day 1, we kick off the project. On day 2, we kick off the validation project. Because these groups certainly need time to get their work done. And if you expect them to turn it around overnight, then that's certainly unreasonable if you delay this until after your app is complete. Okay, then to help facilitate that, we divide our application validation by 3 different roles. And these roles can be internal or they can involve external. So in our case, if we're building an app for a client, that client is the owner of the app, and that's the role that they take on. And they're going to be responsible with some of the things related to the distribution agreement, obtaining the logos, the marketing descriptions, the pricing structure, the legal documents, excuse me. The next role is the application builder, the software engineers. In this case, we take that on in this model. And the third role is the distributor, which effectively is the person that's going to be signing the BAA, or the organization that's signing the BAA with the healthcare site. So in some cases, that's the application owner. And certainly if it's your app, this would be you. In some cases, we take on a distributor relationship for and on behalf of somebody else. And this is just, the purpose of doing this is to create a set of checklists that can be handed out on day 2 when the validation activity starts. These are the things, if we just looked at the application owner, these are the things that you need to provide. The name of the app in the App Store, a summary of the app, 300 characters, and so forth. And if you start this project early, and these certainly will be revised over time, but your project will proceed through validation much more efficiently. Okay, then the third strategy, as we've talked now about going through one vendor and one, with the intention of going to one healthcare site. Of course, as your app is wildly successful, you'll want to go through other vendors, other EHR vendors, and a lot of healthcare sites. So you're going to be going through this security review often. And these security questionnaires that I mentioned earlier are generally entirely unique for every single hospital system that you'll go through. And then also unique for each vendor. And so as we imagine on this side, we're going through a lot of security forms, each of them different. And then as engineers, we're going to want to make an efficient process where we can go through one of these, make continuous improvements, and then take on the next one in a better sense. And this tip is to resist the motivation to take your answers and save them in a knowledge base as canned answers. Instead, it's preferred to take those answers and push them back into your policies, such that your policy can remain the source of truth. I think we're we're at a good place to transition over to Nikolai. Just in transitioning, let's just take a few considerations here. We'll just ask these questions rhetorically, but as you consider your application, you now completed validation, you may be installed in a healthcare site, but you're wanting to scale out and be wildly successful. So some things to consider is, what is your scaling out deployment model? Is it on-prem or cloud? What is your model for testing releases of your application? Testing environments, user acceptance environments, staging, production sites that are early adopters, production sites that are general availability. What is your model for promoting customers to newer versions of your application? So we talked about releasing your app here, and now we're talking about promoting your app at different healthcare sites. What is your model for handling your customers' EHR upgrades as they move to a new version of the EHR? And what is your model for dealing with the reality of security, safety, and notification issues when your app is being used at a healthcare site? So with that, I'll turn it over to Nikolai.
Hey, well, hello everybody from Boston, Massachusetts, and I'm getting somebody. Travis, would you mute yourself if you don't mind?
Yes.
Oh, we lost the slides, by the way.
Hey, Nikolai, this is Melinda.
Okay,
If you are logged into HIPAA as well, try logging onto that. I think you have double audio.
fantastic. And Travis, could we have the slides back, if you don't mind? Okay, I'll keep on talking while Travis sorts out the slides. All right, so congratulations. Now you have an application in production, and end users are waiting in line to use your application in the hospitals, but you still are not out of the woods yet. You've got some concerns that you need to deal with, and those shouldn't come to any surprise to many of us. So there is scalability. Time is precious in the hospital setting. And by the way, if you sign your app with a large healthcare system, data is going to pile up real fast. So you need to be able to scale. You need to run your application on a scalable platform. You need to monitor your application and the data. So nobody launches spaceships without a capable control command room. And same thing for apps in production. We need to monitor them all the time. And you have dashboards which we use and show us useful information, help us diagnose problems, and hopefully resolve them before they become large. Do we have the slides back just yet? No. Am I the only one who is not seeing the slides?
No, we're not seeing the slides.
Okay.
I think that Travis is still there.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I'm going to see if we can get him back for a second.
Yeah, I've rejoined.
Okay, we see you. We see you, okay. Travis. You came back.
I can share again.
It wouldn't be a meeting without some technical difficulties.
We're on previous slides. Go back. More. Okay, here we go. All right. You need to be able to. You need to provide support to your users, and they're going to need your help. You need help desk. You need to be in communication with your users. You need to gather actionable feedback. Your application is going to evolve, and you need to make it better. Otherwise, the competition will do it for you. So you'd better be in touch with your users. And folks, let's face it, there is no such thing as bug-free software. So sooner or later, somebody's going to find a bug in your software, and you need to be prepared for when that happens. So have your strike team ready and have a plan for addressing that fast, because when it's a matter of healthcare and people's health, people are very serious about that. So no toying around with that. HIPAA, of course, that's a complex beast, and there is a lot that can be said just about HIPAA. Travis already covered a lot of the bases there, but you need to have BAA agreements, you need to have encryption, you need to have audit logs, you need to have disaster recovery plans, etc., etc., etc. Lots of things in place just for HIPAA. And that's specific to our industry. And then disaster recovery. When disaster strikes, you need to be able to recover fast. And then AuditWorks will help you investigate when something happens. Why did it happen? Who did it? If you had, God forbid, a data breach, you're definitely going to need the AuditWorks and you're going to be asked about it. So you need to keep that around in addition to your application. And let's not forget, you also are now responsible for keeping up with the FHIR implementations. So the EHR FHIR implementations, and no surprise there, those are going to be moving targets. FHIR is evolving, so are those implementations. Things will keep changing, and the more you integrate with more of those vendors, the more of a headache you're going to have right there. And the name of the game in any business setting, it's a matter of survival, as a matter of fact, is you need to be able to reduce costs. All these things are very expensive and going to cost you a lot of money. You need to keep your costs down, otherwise you're not going to survive. So you always need to keep that in mind. And next slide, please. So what can we do? How can we start tackling all these problems? Well, the first thing that comes to mind to an engineer, and hopefully we have lots of engineers here today, is, hey, I can do it myself. And that's fun. I definitely am loving it. I love tinkering, and you learn a lot doing that. It's a true learning experience. It's for the adventurous. There's a freedom to explore. You can cool things at the end, which kind of work. It's awesome for testing and prototyping, but it does have limitations. Unfortunately, once you start getting to the point where you want to scale up, you have to again be hit with the complexity of all the concerns that we mentioned before, and that's a very considerable complexity. It's going to be distracting you from your core goals of your medical application solving problems. Thank you. So you need to be ready to meet the demands of the large clients, and hopefully your application will be wildly successful and it will be deployed in large hospital systems. So you need to be prepared, and for that you need to scale up fast to deal with the complexity. And economies of scale are wonderful. I love that. In the old days, me like lots of folks were running just a server at home under the desk, and that was fun, lots of fun, but also had lots of pitfalls and restless nights when the hard drive would die on you. Gone are those days. Now we have the cloud, and it's beautiful. For a fraction of the cost, I can actually have 24/7 availability, and everything is virtual and scales. It's beautiful. I love economies of scale. So we want to make sure that we take advantage of these possibilities. And medical applications in the real world, great opportunity, but yeah, there are all these challenges that you have to deal with. The integration services, I believe, can be commoditized. There is lots of things which all of us have to deal with on daily basis, and lots of problems, and those actually are repeat over and over again, and there is no need to reinvent the wheel. We can actually commoditize those and build solutions to address those challenges. Also, I personally, I feel that EHR vendors are great in the way they are embracing FHIR, but that's not their bread and butter. That's not their core business, implementing APIs. They do it because of the ONC and the Cures Act, and that's good and such, but there is always going to be difference in the flavors and the degree of adoption and so forth. There is always going to be variability, and true plug and play is not yet quite there. You need to be working against each and every vendor and adopting your implementation, and that's again a costly proposition. So so the question is, now we're faced with all of those challenges and we need to scale up fast, and that's completely a distraction from what we need to be focused on, which is the special sauce of our solution. So the question is, who do you call? And you got it. It's next slide. Okay, so who do you call? Well, of course, the FHIR integration platform. That's who you call to help you with that. There is a new class, folks, of FHIR-based interoperability solutions, which we're seeing emerging, that are dramatically simplifying the way we do integration and deployments, and are taking the burden off of the shoulders of developers for a lot, if not all, of those concerns, or at least the ones which technically can be taken care of. So these kind of solutions would be very beneficial to both small and large businesses, even for individual developers. I use the cloud myself all the time. Just to give again that example, even for small things, I can run my own website for 50 cents a month. That's all it costs, and it's highly scalable. It runs on a well-known cloud provider. I'm happy. Fantastic. So this is a lot of benefit there for everybody, and for the large enterprise that's actually partnering with a platform which already has abstracted all of those headaches away is a major benefit. Also, one thing which we think should be a key feature of this kind of platform is no vendor locking. Vendor locking is bad. You don't want anything proprietary. You don't want any proprietary standards. That's why we've got this wonderful standardization happening, and communities, dynamic communities and standards. We want to reuse the standards. We want truly well-developed standards, and we want reference level implementations of those standards. We want, as developers, to build applications once and then just run them everywhere. We don't want to be bothered with the details of how to adapt them to this and that and other data source or EHR vendor. So an out-of-the-box solution should support smart on FHIR, CDS hooks, bulk FHIRs, clinical data repositories, terminologies, translations, what have you, caching. You know, I can turn on and off caching, speed things up, reduce cost if needed, control that, data aggregation, and much more. It makes sense to actually bring a solution like that and simplify the workflow and bring in and benefit from simplified workflow, but don't sacrifice advanced features. If you're a power user, you want the advanced features, and the platform should be able to provide that. And of course, the price must be right there. You cannot expect a single developer or a tiny company with a few customers to pay the same as a large company. So solutions like that should be flexible and providing a sliding scale economy kind of pricing, and that would be beneficial. Actually, amazing. I'm a big user of GitHub, and up until last year, I was paying something like $5 a month to get a lot of features. Then, as of a couple of months ago, they dropped that, so now it's $0. I'm paying now $0 actually for this. I would be willing to pay some more, but there is a lot of benefit there, and it's wonderful. Okay, so just to give you an example of actually one of the healthcare integration platform that is out there today and working and available and used by large companies, what you can expect from this kind of platforms is a modern user experience, a modern user interface, lots of power underneath, lots of capabilities which are at your fingertips. You want to be able to deploy your applications in a scalable way, that you want them to be in a HIPAA compliant environment. You want them to be secure, fast. You want to rewire everything under the hood very fast. So the data flow, the piping, the data coming from the data sources, you want to have a lot of control over that. You want to be able to connect to a variety of data sources. And for your app, you don't want to worry about that within your application. You want the platform to take care of all of these things for you. And you want the audit logs and the dashboard and all these other things that we talked about, all at your fingertips. And that's something that a modern healthcare integration platform can actually provide for you at a very reasonable cost. So that's something that I believe can help a lot with that problem. So I think we're running out of time, if I'm correct. So let's go to the summary slide here. Thank you, Travis. And okay, so today we covered a lot of ground. It's certainly a very broad subject, folks. So there is a lot, we can spend days talking about that. So today we just kind of glossed the surface of the subject, but things to be aware about is getting your app validated in production is a complex process. It's a multi-step process. You'll benefit from planning around that and being aware of the differences between the vendor programs and the philosophies of those, and what to expect, and pricing, and how to work with the people who are going to be validating your application. And then after that, keep that relationship ongoing. providing applications, software as a service for the enterprise is a challenging and costly proposition. There is a lot of details that we need to take care of in that setting, and you can never underestimate the cost there and the complexity. And we believe that healthcare integration platforms are a very useful tool that can help you deal with a lot of those challenges. Okay, so at this point, I believe we can take any questions if we have any from the audience. So both Travis and I are available to take your questions. Unfortunately, I closed the Q&A up, so I will to help.
So this is Rick, Rick Geimer, the moderator. We have one question so far, which is, can you comment on the costs of hosting Smart on FHIR apps? Are there any efforts underway to explore costing models for public health use cases?
So for public health use cases, so Travis, do you want to tackle that question, or shall I?
I can tackle the costing. Generally, your app is going to have to be in a HIPAA compliant hosting environment. So that's going to require a set of technical measures and administrative safeguards. And so it certainly is more expensive than hosting an app that is not a healthcare app. I'd even say an order of magnitude more expensive. And that's especially true if you only have one app, but as you have more than one, then you can certainly leverage economies of scale. So it's a squishy answer, but what is certain is that it does need to be a HIPAA compliant environment with processes in place.
All right, thank you. And so far, that's the only question. So I guess everyone knows everything about Smart on FHIR now. You guys did an excellent job.
They did do an excellent job. And if anyone has other questions, you can continue to ask questions, and the moderators will continue to answer those in the session. This is Melinda Stewart again from HL7. I'd like to take a moment and really thank Travis and Nikolai from Interoperian. It was a great presentation. Thank you guys for even getting through that little glitch we had. And thank you, Rick, for being our moderator today. Everyone, appreciate you joining, and we hope you have a great rest of your time, and we see you in the virtual pubs tonight.
All right, thank you.
Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
everybody.
Thanks for attending. See you soon.